Hey everybody, welcome to our live broadcast today. I am Matt, Client Success Manager for White House Custom Color. It's easy for me to say. And just a couple reminders before we start talking with Adam today. Make sure if you haven't subscribed to our Whcc YouTube channel that you do that. You're going to get notifications of all kinds of fun events, live and pre-recorded, and product information and a lot of fun stuff. And if you jump in there, you'll notice a series of redesign videos from your studio, which we're going to talk about today. So make sure and subscribe to that. If you're not following along on Instagram, you'll also want to do that as well at Whcc Pro. And for all the product details that you're wanting to learn about White House Custom Color products, make sure to check out Whcc.com. One more quick thing, if you do have questions for us while we're talking today, and we have Adam here live with us, make sure and put those into the chat, and we will do our very best to answer those along the way today. And we've got a whiteboard. We'll get them up on the board, and we'll have Adam answer them while he's here, and we have him captive. So without further ado, thank you for joining us today. It's so great to have you here all the way from La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. So to begin with, Adam, let's talk a little bit about kind of some of your background. You know, on the personal side, I know your family is the number one important thing to you, your business, how you built it. Can you just give us a quick overview of all that stuff?
Yeah, I started the photography studio about a little over 20 years ago. We just did our 20th anniversary, and in fact, my wife and I just celebrated our 20th anniversary. We got married back in college, and that's when I started getting into photography, and I went full-time as soon as I graduated and kind of evolved the business from there. But really excited to be able to do what my passion is day in and day out, and then have 3 beautiful kids at home, and like you said, love our family and love being able to do what I do at work every day.
Yeah, and you've been in La Crosse the whole time.
Went to the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse and met my wife then in college, and we've lived there ever since.
Awesome. And now people are going to see, you know, your amazing studio that you have now and the progression of this business. But like, did you start in your home? Like, how did you transition from physical location to new spot to where you're at now?
Yeah, I think my first area would have been our loft apartment, which would have been a few hundred square feet. And in fact, I remember meeting with a few clients, potential wedding clients, and I would meet with them in our little living area while my wife is 10 feet above us in the open air loft. It was a really small place. And I quickly then got a physical studio space in downtown, and it was just an unused attic basically, and kind of converted that, and that was back in the film days. And so, and then I got a small little office space to meet with clients that was in the next building, and we would just take them over to the studio back and forth, and then I kept expanding that. Eventually built then my second studio, I would call it, and that was a beautiful 7,000 square foot studio, lots of natural light. That was a really wonderful facility. It was just tucked up on the 4th floor of a downtown building. So. And then it was about 9 years ago we transferred and we built out our current spot. Slightly smaller, but it's more convenient for clients being able to come straight into the studio.
Right, yeah. And by slightly smaller, that space is still
5,000 square feet.
Right, yeah, so not really small at all.
Yeah, and I think as a lot of photographers can relate to, times have changed a little bit from people requiring studio photography all the time, and everybody's business is different. Some love that. We've moved a little bit away from studio photography, natural light rooms, to lots of outdoor photography with very little done inside. So our interior space is really built for us to meet with our clients in our presentation room, as well as all the production of packaging orders and things like that.
Got it. So we've got a couple images of your space, and we're going to talk in detail about the redesign that we just did. But if you are, coming in from the outside, your street level entrance, you are in a commercial space. La Crosse is a beautiful community. About how big is it?
La Crosse is maybe a little over 50,000, and the surrounding community, total is about 100,000 for population.
I know that that's always a popular question, like how big is it, where are you located, your demographic, like that. So then when you come through the front door, now this is looking the opposite way, but this space is amazing. And you just recently unearthed that brick wall.
We did, and we thought a lot about the design of the studio even when we initially built it, because there were no interior walls. That ceiling that you're seeing, that's what we put in. But I had been doing At that point, I'd been doing photography for a dozen years, and I've had 2 other studios that I built out from scratch. So this was my third go around at it. So we knew down to the inch of how large we needed the presentation room and every other part of the studio. So it was a fun build.
Yeah, and since you mentioned presentation room, now this is obviously where you spend a lot of your time. Your office is right in here, and this is where you convert those sessions that you're doing into the sales that you're achieving. So we're looking at the space from the back when you come in the back door of this particular room. This is what the client would see. We're going to specifically talk about that front wall in a little bit here in why you chose the images that you did or the size that you did underneath the TV. And then if we flip the other way, that's basically looking back from the angle that we were just at. You're going to notice all the groupings, everything around there. And for those of you following along today, we are going to get in depth on that stuff. So as we're going, if you have questions, definitely make sure and put them into the chat. So we did a redesign with you in March, correct? At the end of March,
correct.
Early April. Yep. We installed, was it 48 pieces, 49 pieces?
I think it was 55.
Was it?
And,
okay. My numbers are off.
When you and I chatted about it, I said the only way I'll do the redesign is if you can be done with a hard deadline by, and I don't know what I gave you, but it was sometime in March, because once I hit April 1st, we get a pretty packed schedule. So we did it all together, but we rushed to get it done, but it's perfect when it was installed. So.
And I think it's cool to talk about this process, and for those of you that have listened to me ramble on and on and on about the importance of design and groupings and all those types of things, the day that I came down to see your space the first time and we sat down in your sales room, and I thought that we had a really, really good banter. And I thought that there was a good breakthrough in that room that day about talking about what was currently there and what could be there. And I could see, even though you've been in business for a long time and you know a lot of things, I could see some light bulbs come on, and you're like, yep, I think this is the way that we're going to do this. And I remember that very specifically.
I think you've been in the business long enough that you might encounter resistance from photographers who maybe are a little bit, they're longer in the business, and maybe they've always done it certain ways, and maybe you can get them to turn a leaf or two on things. I'm always open-minded to things because I know, but what I'm doing is I'm constantly assessing how my client's going to react to it, what's the best way to get the right product mix in front of them so that they can make the best choices. So I'm always open-minded to things. I just know what's going to work once you tell me what your thought is, right? So yeah, light bulbs come on because as any good business owner, you always have to evolve in how you do it.
Right, exactly. And that thought process has worked because your growth numbers since that has occurred have been very good, and very successful, which is awesome, for everybody. So let's talk about the grouping specifically. And we did pull some images. So as we're talking, because you and I know the groupings very well, but everybody following along does not. So let's start in your front windows with the gallery wrap grouping. So this is going to be a set of 7 images. 5 of them are 16 by 24 and 2 are 16:16. Sorry, my math is off a little bit today. Prior to this, you had a very small grouping in this area. So has this been impactful? Have people liked the design of this? Has this been a seller for you thus far?
Yeah, I think people are intrigued by the overall design, and we just wanted to show them unique designs, right? But we also wanted to find the right family where it was easy for a family of 4 to be able to say they want to feature their family portrait, but they still want to be able to include the kids individuals, the kids together, the parents. And so we like this layout a lot. Again, I think it's a layout that intrigues people. It's not always the right fit for families, but it gives them another option.
Right, it shows them what's possible and gets them thinking in multiples. So now let's bop over to the other side through the front windows. Now, we do have this overlaid with the sizes because I think the way that the sizes fit together here is very interesting for people following along. You were very excited about the acrylics, and I've noticed in your account a lot of people are purchasing acrylics. This particular size grouping, the likelihood of selling this whole thing to somebody is probably not great, but I know that you're breaking this down. So how are you using this to your advantage when you're showing people sizes and stuff?
Well, the first thing we're doing is we're showing them finishes, and so that's why this whole setup is all acrylics, and every image that we selected has different color elements that are featured. So we want to show them how color is a main factor of people who choose acrylics, they really want to see that color pop and that vibrancy.
Yep.
But they can start honing in on, like that upper left image, there's a blue dress, and there's then the clouds in the image right below it, and there's just different, so it's color.
Yeah.
The sizes to us don't matter initially yet.
Okay.
It's a matter of which finish might fit their decor best and their personality, right?
Got it.
And we purposely put this right next to metals because although they might be similar under the same umbrella of finishes, there are some differences to point out to them.
Right.
And as we dig down into sizes, it's going to be an important thing, and we strategically did design that whole piece to have certain sizes in that next to other clusters that have other sizes so that they can quickly hone in on what size might fit best in their home.
Right. So you mentioned metals, so let's move down the wall here. So we did 340/60 white base high gloss metals. And I liked where you kind of led the conversation there. So you're able to show people right next to each other the difference between acrylic and metal. So you are very, very good with your words. And I love that you take your clients, you know, for a dream walk. How are you explaining the difference in the value point of the acrylic compared to the metal?
Well, how are we explaining the difference in between acrylic and
right,
metal?
yeah, and getting people to understand the the acrylic is this versus the metal.
I think as we're showing it to them, the main difference is going to be they'll see if there's any color difference, any reflectivity difference, but it's the thickness. You know, with the acrylics, you're getting that thickness to it, and we also have the 1-inch acrylic blocks that we can really show them how you get a little bit more of a 3D effect with those 1-inch acrylic blocks, and you'll get that a little bit with the acrylics on the wall. You'll also see just a little bit of edge lighting around the acrylics, just with how the light pattern works with the image. And we just want them to hone in on the differences between them. And the acrylic is going to be a little bit heavier, a little bit more of a luxury feel as they hold it.
Okay.
But all in all, when it's displayed on their wall, it's just personal preference.
Okay.
And when we'll get into pricing later too, and we price our things pretty strategically where we're not making much more one way or the other with most finishes that our clients select.
Okay.
That allows us not to guide the conversation towards ones that we might benefit more on.
Got it.
We've really tried to be there for the client, which finish is going to be best on display in their home. And although I might personally love acrylics, and I love metal float frames and now acrylic float frames, and there's just things that I love.
Yep.
I'm pretty passionate about all the finishes because I'm trying to get out of them which finish they might like best.
Yeah, what's going to be very best for them. So now as we move down and turn a little bit of a corner here, we're going to get to the trio grouping above the couch. And we'll talk specifically about your usage point for this, but I want to point out to everybody that's watching along here, you did this specifically where you put the 30x40 in a float frame, and then you put the two 20x30s without to show that you can do it as a combo, or you could do it completely with or without. Yeah. I'm assuming that a trio grouping like this has been a very popular thing, the way that you photograph.
It's probably our most popular set. Now, whether they're all 3 verticals or you have a horizontal in the middle with 2 verticals, but we did this for a couple reasons. One is to show people they can do a mixed media approach where you can maybe upgrade into a float frame to feature that center image, but put other additional images that are complementary. And whether they're in the same finish, just without the framing, you know, but it works really well.
Right.
And that was one reason. The second reason is as we're doing our dream walk and we're showing them acrylics, then we show them metals, we're getting our clients to give us preferences along the way. And as we walk, it's if you could only pick between acrylics and metals, which one would you lean towards? And we use those words carefully because they're not making choices yet. All we're trying to do is get them to start thinking about what they might love best. Okay. And it also allows us to only price out then the finish or two that they're kind of leaning towards at the end.
Right.
And we can price out additional ones later. But then we're getting into canvases, and then we're just talking purely about canvases. Do they like the canvas look and feel better, or are they liking the metal or acrylic that they lean towards? Okay. And then we're talking about float frames. And now we're saying the finish that you liked metals the best, can be in a float frame just like this. And you'll see our corner wall display that we get to, those have 2 metal float frames. And now we're talking about standalone metals versus metal float frames. Yeah. And so we're just continuing to walk through the different finishes and continuing to have them talk with us.
Right. So you're really compartmentalizing the decision process to not overwhelm your client.
For sure. Okay. If you give them 6 or 8 finishes to choose from, it's going to be a hard conversation. Give them 2 and it's an A-B choice. Yeah. They're going to select one. The other thing we did is, and you'll see in that corner wall display that we have, and I don't know if we'll jump to it or not, but we've got 2 large 24x36 metal float frames. but we paired it with some canvases.
Yep.
And the thing I really like and what I found, and that I didn't maybe initially know that I would be talking with clients, it's the difference in color quality on metals versus canvas.
Yep.
And so when we look at that portrait there, and it's covered up a little bit just with the sizing, but the girl in the bottom left corner, she's got that beautiful gold sweater, and there is a huge color difference on metal versus canvas. It's like night and day. And now every client can really see what I'm talking about. When you want color, you're really in the acrylics and metals.
Yeah.
And when you just want the finish, because you like the wrapped look or the canvas look.
Yep.
And we have some other canvases throughout the studio that look amazing, right? But we just want them to see the differences.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, the metals tend to be a little bit more contrasty, a little bit more bold and rich. Yeah, definitely. So let's flip over to my favorite grouping here quick before we bop into the presentation room. So I really love this one. I kind of fell in love with it when we were doing the installation. These are all photo prints in our Woodland natural frame. 220/40s, a 1624, 20 by 24, fits perfectly into the rectangle. Talk to us about these more custom sizes on the outside. What has been your reaction from your clientele to the 20/40 versus like a 30/40 or 30/45?
Well, sometimes if you were to group two 30 by 40s and put images in the middle, the total width of the wall grouping might be larger than what a wall could accommodate, or might look appropriate, right?
Yep.
So number one is we want to have some custom sizes where we can still achieve the result they're looking for by combining certain images together but featuring them in the correct sizes.
Yep.
The correct size is just visually to be appealing, right? But also to fit the overall size
Yep.
that we're looking for. But then we also just want them to get interested in, could you do this? Like I was looking for kind of a panoramic, horizontal, longer image for this downstairs room that we have. But most people don't think about vertical images, that we can make those into a panoramic. And
Right.
most images can still fit within these guidelines. And if
Yeah.
it can't, we can custom size this to any size they want, or we just break it back out to 30 by 40 or 30 by 45. And
Yeah, absolutely. I love, especially the one with the little girl and the dad. I mean, it just, you don't need the stuff on the left and the right, because the image is right there.
if clients don't see what you can produce, they're not going to purchase it, right?
So just to say what you just said in a different way, you cannot sell what you do not show.
Yeah, and I can tell you we sell very little of what we don't show. There are not sizes that we magically sell and we're not showing them on display at the studio.
Yeah.
And I get that everybody's space is different, and I've always been a commercial photography studio setup, so I've always had a space in the downtown, so I'm not as attuned to what I would do if I was a home-based photographer, and there are ways you can present it, and there's software that you have that can help achieve those results.
Yeah.
But for us, we've always had a physical space. We've just had to decide on what's the best way to show the different sizes, and you'll see some before and afters of potentially, but how we had it below our TV and how we were going from the smallest sizes we would recommend to larger, and I think we've just evolved to showing them groupings and displays and the finishes. It's just a walk so that we can get information, feedback from the client, right?
Yeah.
And so as we're doing that walk, we're gaining feedback first on finishes, second on overall size of the walls that they would put it on in their homes, so that we can have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
And then by that point, we've already talked about not only maybe their top 10 or 12 images, but out of those top 10 or 12 that they might want to feature in their home, which ones would they actually display as wall portraits in their home. So now we've honed it in on their top 3 or their top 5 or their top 7, but we know which ones they would, in a perfect world, would love to have featured in their home. And now it's my job to combine all of that feedback, the finishes, the sizes, their wall space, and which images they would prefer to have in their home in the different spaces. Now it's my job as their expert in interior design with these wall portraits to give them the best layouts and the best options. And and that's when sometimes I'll just present them one option because it's what's going to fit best and they love it right away. And sometimes I'll present them more than that. And it's always about feedback, right?
Right.
You get the client to say, I don't know if that would fit, or maybe that's not exactly what we'd want to do. I've been doing this long enough that I can show them the second, third, and fourth ways that I could combine those images in different size groupings.
Yeah, and you're definitely taking the time to listen, and that whole time making the plan along the way.
Correct.
Thinking ahead of what you need to do. So let's talk about this corner display. So you just mentioned right before we went live today that has been really very handy to you, and you kind of touched on that a little bit before. But now normally a person wouldn't think right away of decorating a corner or putting a grouping into a corner. This one I think is really fun, and you're showing it in a way that somebody could say, oh, I really love this whole thing, or I love this side, or I love this side, and horizontal, vertical, same size. Can you dig into that a little bit more detail?
Yeah, and I think initially we thought it would be a way to show a corner grouping only, and that would be the only benefit, and that's been helpful because there have been clients who've said, I have a corner space and that would work really well. We found it's even more beneficial for one, showing them the difference between metal and canvas because it's the same family, so they can see the difference and then they can tell us which style they like best, what finish. And the other reason we really love it is that the two larger portraits are 24 by 36. And those 24 by 36, that's kind of the middle size for wall portraits for us. We're going 40-60 down to 30-45, 24 by 36, and then our 20 by 30 and 16 by 24. And we have featured in numerous places throughout the studio 40 by 60s and the 30 by 45. So the next step down is this. And as we're talking with clients, we're really just saying the spot above your fireplace that you mentioned, you wanted the featured family portrait. That lets them really just visualize on walls, both in a horizontal and a vertical version, if this image is too large or too small for that space, because then it's easy to go a notch up or a notch down.
So when you're talking to clients and you have that 40-60, 30-45, 24-36, 20-30, 16-24, are you referring to those as those dimensions, or are you saying we have large, extra large? Like, how do you refer to those?
Yeah, as we're guiding them through sizes, we're generally never referring to size.
Okay.
And I think part of it
actual inches.
There's a couple reasons. We just visually need them to say that feels right?
Yep.
Why do they need to know the exact size? And if they ask what size is that, we tell them exactly what size it is. We know it, right? But it just is not pertinent to the decision-making process.
You don't lead with that.
Other thing is, I think people always have in their head that a 16 by 20 is a giant wall portrait.
And the huge 8 by 10.
And we have those on display as single portraits, and on the right wall, a 16 by 24 can be a very appropriate size. But generally, we're showing them larger portraits, and that just to spark the conversation with them, so they can analyze in their home what might fit best as a featured wall portrait. They've never been invited into those conversations before. The school photographers, the largest they're going to are 8 by 10s, right? And maybe they go larger, but that's kind of typical. And any other photographer they've worked with, let's say they just got a USB, they're just making what they know, and so they're just by default just producing 16 by 20s, right? It's our job to show them beautiful wall portraits in the right sizes in our space so that they can analyze their home and judge what's best for them, right? So, as we're going through the process, we're just showing them the largest size that we recommend for wall portraits is this size, and we're showing them a 40 by 60 in our presentation room. And then we're pointing to the next size down, and then we talk about the middle size, and although we're not referring to it as a 24 by 36, we're just showing them the size down.
Just the progression.
And then we just show them all the way down to a 16 by 24, but the 16 by 24 even, we're only showing that in a grouping of 3. And because we tend not to recommend a 16 by 24 as a standalone wall portrait, so we would tend to lean towards that being in a grouping only.
Got it. So you mentioned the presentation room a few times here, so let's walk in there next. So we had put this image up earlier, but we're going to dig in a little bit deeper now. So when your clients walk in, this is the direction they're coming from. They're going to be hanging out on that couch, and you're using your TV to show their images and do their presentation. This grouping that is below is very purposeful in its creation. So the center is going to be a 36 by 45 acrylic piece. I believe the right hand one, is that the metal, or is that that's the metal? And then the left hand one is a premium gallery wrap. So those are 24-36s, float framed, but you have 3 different surfaces. Explain why.
Well, one, we wanted to show what we envisioned as our most popular finishes to be, which were going to be acrylic, metal, and canvas, although a little bit leaning towards acrylic and metals. We also wanted to show float frame versus standalone. And then we also wanted to show a custom size. So it's kind of bringing it all together. But the other main reason we did all this, not only to show all the different finishes, we wanted to show that wall grouping in a fairly large combination. And although we could build one even larger with a 40-60 in the middle and 30 by 45s on the outside, this is probably about as large as most clients would consider to have a set of 3 on most walls, right? But then we can walk them through. We have other spaces throughout our studio, 2 others, in fact, that we can easily show them what the next size down is, but keeping the grouping the same. And so it's purposeful for a lot of reasons.
And we talk about the most valuable real estate and kind of the Gold Coast walls. Now you have a little different process, which we're going to dig into with your walk that you do. But if you have a sales room, you as in everybody is lifting along, and your clients are staying static during the sales appointment, where they're looking, you want them to be looking at what you wish they would purchase. And you have that in the size that basically is up on your TV. So if you're looking at a horizontal image, it's almost a 3645. And if it's a vertical image, it's almost a 2436. So it's just being reproduced in the 3 favorite finishes. I think it's brilliant the way that it's done, because you can do that as a collection. You can do it individually. Here's the finishes, and they would never have to move. So I think that you've done an excellent job of that. So let's do a little spin here in the presentation room. So looking back towards the door that we came in through, the vertical grouping, that has been a very popular thing that we have been seeing here at the lab, taking small spaces and designing groupings that people would have a hard time saying, I don't have a wall that big. Has this been a successful run so far? Has this sparked good conversation for you?
Yeah, and I think not only that grouping, and I'll talk about that one, but right to the right of it is my family portrait, which is a 20 by 30, and right to the left of that wall, which they're looking at the same time, is a 30 by 45 canvas.
Okay.
And so they're seeing 3 small walls, and they're seeing 3 different ways to do it. And that's been beneficial. The set of 3, always beneficial. Whether it's a high school senior, again, you've got 3 kids and you want to do their individuals, or you've got 2 kids and want to put the kids together with their individuals above and below.
Yep.
But it just lets them, again, think about spaces in their home that aren't significantly large, width-wise. They've got some ability to use the height advantage to it. So, but also it just helps us, again, just hone in on different sizes and how even like a 30 by 45 in a smaller space is a beautiful featured portrait. Right? So you're not always just defaulting to the smallest size available.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that. I hadn't thought of that before, but yes, you're correct. It's standalone, vertical grouping, your family, and then the kids. I mean, yeah, all within never having to turn your head.
And we're showing 3 different finishes again. Canvas to framed portraits to an image block.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's go to your biggest display that we put up into the studio. So this is a grouping of 12, and this is all done from one session, extended family. And for everybody that's listening along today, if you were considering putting in wall groupings, I would recommend very heavily that you keep them from one standard session, or from a single session, I should say. So people can look at that and understand that they can do this as a product, and it's not just, here's a bunch of pretty pictures hung together, and now I have to figure out, oh yes, I can actually purchase this. So tell us about this grouping, Adam. It's 12 pieces. It takes up, what, 10.5 feet of wall space? It's pretty large.
It is. It's one of my favorite families to work with. We get to photograph them every year, every fall, and it's out at their property. The grandparents, they've got 4 kids, and all 4 kids are married and have their own kids. And so this is just a beautiful grouping for any extended family, and we can always design it different ways depending on the number of kids, right? But it features the grandparents with the grandkids, all 4 of their kids with their families, and then their grandkids individually as their sets. It's just a really wonderful display for any family that would walk in, and it's not to pull at their heartstrings or do anything other than you have to show people how you can design something beautiful in their home that they want to own.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's also easy for us to price out, what is it if we just do the left half of that? I just want the featured family portrait and then just our 3 kids together, and then us with the grandkids, and maybe just the grandkids. And there's just so many different combinations. And then I think people struggle too with great walls. They're not quite sure how to put an entire display of portraits on one wall that's not overwhelming. And as you're looking at this set too, this is also beneficial. We talk about that 8 by 12 all the time, and we talk about how an 8 by 12 is completely inappropriate as a wall portrait by itself on a wall. There is no wall small enough where that's going to look like it was appropriately placed.
Right.
But in the right combination with a well thought out plan, the design is actually perfect as is. And this is the way to show them how we can incorporate smaller portraits into a larger concept.
Definitely. And this is metal prints and framed prints and premium gallery wraps. And I know that Lucas has been kind of bopping back and forth here to show everybody the sizes. And if just a reminder too, if you do have questions about these groupings while we're doing this live today, or if you're watching the recording later on, make sure and put those questions in the chat, and we'll get those answered for you. We know where Adam lives. We can track him down, and we can get answers pretty easily. So now that we've gone through and talked about the main points of your displays, the real, I think I'll call it the meat and potatoes, that really interests me with you is this dream walk that you're doing with clients. So I'm just going to hush up, and you've touched on a little bit here, but how do you, when you get to that point after your session, after the presentation, after they're narrowed down, what are your words? How do you say, let's get up and go?
And at that point, like you said, we've whittled it down to maybe their top 30 or 50 or 80 images, and out of those we've identified maybe the top 10 that they would consider. We always talk about that. They would consider for wall portraits or images that they would give to family and friends.
Yeah.
And at that point, we say we're just going to take a little tour of the studio, because it's our goal to show you the different finishes, the different ways that you can print your portraits. So we're going to just walk around quick and look at the different finishes. We're going to talk about the places you may display those in your home, and then we'll talk about sizes that might be appropriate or the different combinations we would display those.
Yep.
So at that point, we get up and we walk back out to the main reception area, and first we're showing them the acrylics. Okay. And we're talking about the acrylic finish and the beautiful colors, and that it has a little bit of a thicker look to it. And we talk about the differences between that and then the metal portraits that are right next to it on display, and lots of 40 by 60s all together in one setting. So it's a very impactful, really large wall for them to be able to see all of those different finishes.
Yep.
And we're getting them, again, we just asked them for, what's your preference? If you could only choose between acrylics and metals, which one would you lean towards? And we've talked about the differences, and we've looked at, again, the color, and we've looked at the darker areas of the images and the lighter, and just seen the color variations and differences. And that's all we're looking for. If you could only pick between these two finishes, would you lean towards acrylic or would you lean towards metal? And we're not making decisions at this point, we tell them. We're not looking at sizes at this point. It's just purely finish. Okay. At that point, they probably have leaned towards one. And sometimes, one spouse leans towards one and the other, and we don't get stuck there. We just move on. We say, great, that's fine. You like both of the finishes. One of you like one more versus the other. We might make the comment, we know she's going to win anyways.
Isn't that the truth?
But then we're jumping behind the couch then, which is right in the same room. So that main reception couch, and that's where we have our canvases on display. One's a float frame. We're not even talking float frames. We're just looking at the canvas. Okay. And then we're talking about the look, feel, and texture of canvas, the wrapped edges. They have them displayed in their homes. They've seen them before. Do they still lean towards their acrylic or metal choice, or do they now lean maybe a little bit more towards the canvas? At that point, we're actually walking back into our presentation room, because we want to show them now acrylic, metal, and canvas in a room that does not have natural light. Because we have found that our large 10-foot windows on a sunny day produces a lot of reflection on those acrylics, and a little bit on metals. They're a little bit further down in the room. So we want them to, again, just to reconfirm their choice. We're still leaning towards acrylics. We think that's the best for our home, or metals, or canvas. At that point, we're going back out then, especially if they're on the fence between canvas and maybe metals, and then we're showing them the corner display. And the corner display is going to be great because we can show that portrait both in metal and in canvas and show them the color difference. Okay. And we're trying to get them to reconfirm and then drastically see the difference. So if I could give advice, if anybody wants to print that, print the same family, but somebody who has a big color pop. They have got a dress or a sweater or something that has a lot of color to it, so they can just see the variation on canvas and metal and decide which one's best for them, right? Yeah. So we get them to reconfirm. Now that we have them between metal, acrylic, or canvas, now we're talking about standalone images, so a standalone acrylic versus an acrylic float frame. And we're showing them both of those. Okay. And we're just getting them to lean towards that. And at that point, we might even interject, you might consider your featured family portrait to have in a float frame. It sounds like you like that, but you might not need all of those done in an acrylic float frame. Right. And we always tell them we're happy to price out any finish you might like, and there's definitely an upgrade to float frames because we're printing the float frame along with the acrylic. Yep. And again, leaning towards that. And then lastly, we're talking about framed portraits and image blocks. And if they lean towards acrylics or metals by that point, we're glossing over those pretty quick because those are going to be much more comparable to a canvas print versus a metal or acrylic. But if they like canvas, then we're talking about the differences between an image block and a canvas wrap. And then we're going into the framed portraits, which we have on display throughout the studio as well.
Yep.
And at that point, we know what they like. They probably like this main finish, or they have a secondary one they were toying with. It allows me then to start having the conversation on sizes, the right groupings, the right sizes, their walls that they're going to display it on.
Yep.
And that's when we move into that conversation, which gets us to where my goal is. I want to price out everything they might want to invest in. I just want to get to the bottom dollar so that we can talk about that and that they can say that works for them, or they can allow me the opportunity to help redesign in different sizes or different finishes and get them to where they feel comfortable.
Right, so you're maximizing what they are, all the information they're giving to you to get them the most for their money and the best design from those images for their space.
It's about designing with a purpose, it's about designing with a dream, and it's about doing all of that without a price menu initially, because we want to know the right sizes, the space that they have, the right combinations. We want them to dream along with us now that they've seen their images. And we make it really comfortable. My clients, my whole goal is I want the clients to come back next year and the year after, and when their kids graduate high school, and when they have their weddings, when they have their extended family in town. So none of this process is uncomfortable, where it's we add up kind of where they're at, and then we stop talking and just try to get them to sign on the dotted line. That's none of our approach. Our approach is purely what would fit best in your home. Getting to that final dollar amount, but then letting me do the real work at that point, which is if they need to reduce maybe their investment level, I'm really good at helping them maintain the idea of what they wanted displayed in their home, but maybe reducing a finish or the sizes, or maybe taking away one wall portrait because we can do that a little bit differently in their home, but put the dollars into what's most important to them. Because by now we've talked a lot, right? And they've really told me they really, the main goal is above the fireplace, that main featured family portrait is the most important. In their kitchen, the kids together, that's something they want to look at every day. And maybe we go down from a 24 by 36 down to a 20 by 30 to help save a few dollars there, right? There's just different things you can do when you're having a conversation with a client versus another approach would be a price menu at the beginning where they're picking off a sheet of paper. They're not really designing with a purpose with the right sizes, right? So it's my goal. I want my clients incredibly happy, and that's the only goal. I want them to love their images, but I want them to love their displays at home, but I also want them to refer me, and I want them to come back as their personal family.
Yeah, definitely. So you have, I'm sure people following along and listening today that are not currently doing an in-person sales session are going, holy smokes, like how do I even begin to keep track of these things? Now, you've been doing this for 20 years. How long, if you're going to be totally transparent, did it really take you to get to a place where you could function in so many different thoughts at once and be able to listen, lead, suggest, knowing like what your end result is going to be or what you hope it's going to be? Like, how long did it really take you to hone those skills?
Well, I think knowing what I know now, I could take a studio owner and walk them through that process, and within months they could be trained up to be able to achieve similar results, right? Learning on your own and putting all the pieces together, which, again, I learned from conferences in different ways, and I would grab one piece of info from this speaker and another one from this. If I had somebody just handhold me through the process, I could have shaved years off the process, right? But also there's pitfalls. There's different ways to approach when you're getting down into the investment levels to making sure clients are feeling comfortable through that process, that they can ask questions, that they can tell you what their perfect world scenario is for a dollar amount that they were hoping to invest, and you can show them the ways that they can step down from where they're at and get closer, and then where they can get within, and then it's up to them. Then it's up to them to make the decision where they're at, and we're just really helpful. And I'm not really in sales. I'm about just helping our clients design what's perfect for them. And when they do a family portrait that they've never done before, and their kids now are headed off to college, this is really important and meaningful to them. But that client's expectations, can be all over the place, and I have to dig through conversation to find out what it really is, right? So how long did it take? It took a long time, right? I've been doing it for 20 years. My first 10 years, I probably don't want to go back and press repeat. It was just, it's a process as you go. One from film to digital, 2 different studio spaces, as our family grew, there's just so many different variables. But taking a client now, it would be so nice for if I was a newer studio owner, or even one just wanting to double my business and just grow as a photographer.
Yeah.
If I had somebody who could handhold through the sales process,
yeah.
it's the biggest piece of our photography kind of world is the presentation room, right?
Yep.
We spend time creating the portraits, but the amount of time that we spend in that room going through images and making decisions is way beyond what it takes for me to create images.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. I would assume that it did take you several years to get to where you're at, but then when you get to that point to fine tune and to really listen, it becomes a skill set that you gain, and you don't have to think about it anymore because you're just consciously, your head is going to these places and thinking ahead of, suggesting, and like you said, that you're the expert. You should be the person that says, this is what I feel that you should be doing with these because I do this every day.
Well, and as you're sitting with a client, so they sit on the couch and they look at the TV and my desk is off to the side and I've got my monitor there. I can choose what to display on that TV versus what's on my display. And what's on my display is while they're deciding between which of these 3 images do I like better, there's some small differences. I know I've got 5 or 10 seconds to continue working on a layout that I already have in mind because they've already identified their top portraits as we're going through.
Right.
So I'm working on those layouts as they're deciding what they love the best. And that way when we get to the end, I can show them, this was what my thought was for the living room wall that you had mentioned because you wanted to make that your featured setup.
Yeah.
And I already can show them different ideas and designs. And then I can show them the finishes and the sizes that design would look like in their home because I have them on display at the studio.
Yeah.
But there's no awkward downtime. We're just transitioning from one to the next, but it's because I'm doing a lot of behind the scenes work.
Right.
And I'm totaling up where they would be at as we're going so that we can get to numbers at the end and we can chat about that conversation. But there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah,
I think that's one piece most studios are missing, most owners of studios, the people who are doing the sales presentations, that they're not being maybe trained in that world enough. And everybody's floundering on their own. And I floundered for so many years until I put the right pieces together. And now we're really comfortable with where we're at with having those conversations with clients.
Yeah, definitely. And you will continue to evolve, as your business grows and as you're learning. I feel like you learn from every client, you pick up a little piece and the fact that you're able to listen with your right ear and design, with your left ear basically, and in doing that, I'm sure that is one of the reasons that you've been so successful is because you are eliminating that downtime. This is what I feel that you should do. That's got a lot of power to it. If it were me, this is what I would do, kind of thing. So before we go, because we're running out of time here, confirm for me, when you're doing your sessions, you are doing the session, then you're giving the client a little bit of a break, and then they're coming back to the studio right away to do the sales presentation with you, correct?
Correct. We transitioned fully to this method about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And we do 2 sessions a day, first thing in the morning and one in the early afternoon. And our main reason for doing this is the client just has to take one time off work, one time off school, one block of time.
Okay.
Everybody's there, all the decision makers are there. And for us, then, we're meeting with the clients at our studio. We're talking about a location that day that might look perfect with their outfits that they're wearing.
Yeah.
We're heading out, creating all their portraits. When the session gets done, we just take a short break. We take about a 30-minute break. When I run back to the studio, it takes me about 20 minutes to go through. I might have photographed 300, 400, 500, 600, 700 images of that family.
Wow.
I will whittle that down in 20 minutes to the 100 or 150 images that I'm going to show that client.
Okay.
Then they come back. So they're back within 30 minutes of the last image being taken, and they're back in that room, and I'm ready to go. And then it takes us up to 2 hours to go through all those images, get it down to the set they'd like to keep, and we put those into an album. Our main 2 goals for our client is to have beautiful wall portraits and to have a custom designed album. Okay. And so we whittle then those maybe 150 images down to their top 40 or 50 or 60 that they want to keep. And then we've also identified their top 10 or top 5 or top 8 that they would consider for wall portraits. At that point, that's when we're transitioning into the tour of the studio, the kind of dream walk, having the conversations about the right sizes and combinations. We're discussing the investment, and we're getting the decision then made as to what works best for their home. Yeah. And the decision, mainly with the way we do our collections, focuses on wall portraits. That's really the only difference that's going to make a financial difference in their final number, it's going to be wall portraits.
Yeah.
After that, we're including an album. We're including some other things for them. So the decisions are just really simple then.
Got it. That's awesome. And I hope that everybody that's watching along today and watching the recording of this understands the value of, in that last 3 minutes, of how you literally laid out your process. And now to be able to take that and make it your own, obviously you're going to have some different things, but pay attention to that. I love how you say the dream walk. The decision makers are all present. Your compartmentalized finish, size, images, then price, at the end. And you're making it very easy for people to follow along with you, because it can be an overwhelming process for everybody. So for those of you that are considering getting into doing in-person sales, definitely listen to that segment again and again and again and start making your own plan on that. So one last question before we let you go, and I know the answer to this, but everybody listening does not. So when we were there, I said that my favorite grouping, and I thought the one that you were going to sell the very most of, was the 220 by 24, 1624, 2024. What has actually been your most popular one? Or how have you created the sales from those groupings if it isn't one specific grouping?
Well, I think it's the grouping of 3. And again, whether that's that horizontal featured family portrait with 2 complementary images on the sides.
Like the one above the couch?
The one above the couch, the one below the TV,
Okay.
And then my personal family. I've got my 3 kids in 3 vertical images. Because it's so easy.
Yeah.
Whether it's an engagement couple saying, these are my 3 favorite images, a family who wants the family, the kids together, and the parents together. There's just so many different ways to do that set.
Yep.
I think the ones that are more intricate are really fun, so clients who walk in are just impressed, right?
Yep.
It's just an impressive look and design. And although a few of them will say, tell me how much that is, or could we do that with my family? How would that combination look? We love those conversations because it's so much fun to play with their images and show them how that would look, right?
Yeah.
If they send us an image of their wall at home ahead of time, we can show them exactly how that would look. But day in and day out, sets of 3 are going to be the easiest thing to showcase to a client, have them say that would fit in their home.
That's awesome. And I'm assuming that when they're looking at those more intricate groupings and they're thinking along the multiple lines, if they do end up not going with a bigger grouping and still into one of those sets of 3, that's amazing. That's great.
Yeah, and again, I have the conversation with the client. I know what their preferences are. In a perfect world, we would love all of this, but we really want to make sure that this is a focus. So I know if we're at a certain investment level that they would like to work down, I'm really good at doing that part and showing them if we can take off these 2 pieces and can focus on the set of 3, that's going to save quite a bit and get you to the number you were hoping for, and then it's up to them to decide if that's worth it or they want to keep the full set.
Right. So before we let you go here, Adam, we really appreciate you being here today and driving all the way over here and driving home tonight. It's been awesome to get to know you better and know your family and have dinner and be able to hang out. It's been fantastic. If you were going to leave with one piece of advice for somebody listening along today that's inspired by your story, by your studio, by the groupings, by your sales, what would that one piece of advice, if you could just pull that out of the air, if you could go back to Adam 15 years ago or 18 years ago and give yourself a piece, what would that be?
Well, I think be intent on creating the most beautiful images you can for a family. It's hard to sell something that you're not proud of, right? Mm-hmm. And taking those beautiful images and giving them amazing selections to choose from and guiding them through that process in a really helpful, meaningful, comfortable way, right?
Awesome.
So
yeah, that's perfect. So for everybody following along today, thank you for joining us. This has been amazing. I hope you've enjoyed the last 45 minutes. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't subscribed to the Whcc YouTube channel, definitely do that. You're going to get notified of lives like we're doing today. There's tons of content on there. There are 4 awesome episodes from your studio redesign that goes much more into depth about befores and afters and the process and the thought, all the things that go with that. You can check that out. We're going to have some more redesigns heading onto the YouTube page yet this year and in 2023. So make sure and subscribe to that. If you're not following along on Instagram, it's at WHCC Pro, so make sure and follow on there. And then WHCC.com is going to have all your product details. It's going to talk about a lot of the things that Adam mentioned today. So if you do have questions, feel free to continue to put them in the chat. We always keep an eye on those and we'll get them answered for you. And until the next time, we thank you for joining us today and we'll talk to you soon.